Monaco Children's Hospital, March 8, 1968. Princess Grace was making her weekly visit to the children's ward when she heard crying coming from a room at the end of the hallway, a room that nurses and doctors avoided whenever possible. Inside, she found 7-year-old Thomas, a boy who had been born with severe cerebral palsy and was completely unable to speak, walk, or care for himself. The medical staff had declared him hopeless and recommended that his family place him in an institution. Thomas had been abandoned at the hospital 6 months earlier by parents who couldn't cope with his disabilities. No family wanted to adopt him. The doctors said he would never improve. But when Grace Kelly looked into Thomas's eyes, she saw something that everyone else had missed: brilliant intelligence trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey his mind. Grace made a decision that shocked the entire Monaco royal family. She was going to take Thomas home and prove that every child deserves love, hope, and a chance to reach their potential. What happened over the next 10 years would not only transform Thomas's life, but would change how the world treats children with disabilities forever. Grace Kelly didn't just save one abandoned child, she started a revolution in special needs, care that continues to help thousands of children today. But the real miracle wasn't what Grace did for Thomas, it was what Thomas taught Grace about courage, determination, and the true meaning of unconditional love. To understand the magnitude of what Grace Kelly accomplished with Thomas, you need to understand how society treated disabled children in the 1960s. Children with severe disabilities like cerebral palsy were often hidden away in institutions where they received minimal care and no education. Most doctors believed these children were incapable of learning or improving. Families were routinely advised to put the child away and forget about them. Parents were told that disabled children would only bring shame and burden to the family. Thomas's parents, Jean and Pierre Dubois, had tried to care for him for 7 years, but the constant medical appointments, the financial strain, and the social stigma had destroyed their marriage and their hope. The doctors told us Thomas would never be anything more than a vegetable, Pierre Dubois would later admit. They said keeping him at home was cruel to our other children. In September 1967, the Dubois family made the heartbreaking decision to abandon Thomas at Monaco Children's Hospital. They left a note saying they could no longer care for him and asking that he be placed in a state institution. Thomas spent 6 months alone in that hospital room. The medical staff provided basic physical care, feeding him through a tube, changing his diapers, keeping him clean, but no one talked to him, played with him, or treated him as anything more than a breathing body. The head of pediatric medicine, Dr. Francois Moreau, had written in Thomas's file, "Patient shows no signs of cognitive awareness. Recommend immediate transfer to long-term institutional care. Prognosis: no potential for improvement." When Grace Kelly entered Thomas's room on March 8, 1968, she found a child who had been emotionally abandoned even more than physically abandoned. Thomas was lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down his face. His body was twisted from the cerebral palsy, his limbs contracted and unmoving. He couldn't speak or gesture. But when Grace looked at him, Thomas's eyes focused on her face with an intensity that took her breath away. "Hello, sweetheart," Grace said softly, sitting beside his bed. "My name is Grace. I'm here to visit you." Thomas couldn't respond verbally, but Grace noticed something the medical staff had missed. His eyes were tracking her movements, following her face, showing clear signs of awareness and intelligence. Grace spent 2 hours in that room talking to Thomas as if he could understand every word. She told him about the palace, about her children, about the beautiful gardens where birds sang every morning. Thomas listened intently, his eyes never leaving Grace's face. And gradually Grace began to notice subtle responses. When she spoke in a happy voice, Thomas's expression softened. When she mentioned sad things, his eyes showed distress. "You understand everything, don't you?" Grace said quietly. "You're trapped in there, but you understand every word." Grace called Dr. Moreau to Thomas's room. "Doctor, I believe this child is far more aware than anyone realizes," Grace said. "Look at his eyes. Watch how he responds to conversation." Dr. Moreau was skeptical. "Your Serene Highness, I've been treating Thomas for 6 months. He shows no signs of cognitive function. Have you ever talked to him as if he could understand?" Dr. Moreau admitted that he had not. Medical protocol for hopeless cases was to provide physical care, but not to waste time on communication or stimulation. Grace made an extraordinary request. "I want to take Thomas home with me. I want to adopt him." Dr. Moreau was shocked. "Your Serene Highness? That's not advisable. Thomas requires constant medical care. He'll never walk, talk, or live independently. The burden on your family would be enormous. The burden on Thomas of having no family is worse, Grace replied firmly. Every child deserves love and the chance to reach their potential, whatever that potential might be. Dr. Moreau tried to dissuade her. He explained the medical challenges, the financial costs, the social implications. He warned that caring for Thomas would be a full-time responsibility that would impact her royal duties and her other children. Grace listened patiently, then said, "Doctor, I've made my decision. Please prepare the adoption papers." Prince Rainier was initially opposed to Grace's plan. They had 3 healthy children, Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie, and a demanding schedule of royal obligations. Taking on a severely disabled child seemed overwhelming. "Grace, I admire your compassion," Rainier said, "but we must be practical. Thomas needs specialized medical care that we can't provide at the palace." "Then we'll bring the specialized care to the palace," Grace replied. "We'll hire the best therapists, install the necessary equipment, create whatever environment Thomas needs to thrive." Grace's children had mixed reactions to the news that Thomas would be joining their family. Caroline, who was 11, was excited about having a new brother. Albert, age 10, was curious but worried about how much attention Thomas would require. 9-year-old Stephanie was simply happy that someone lonely would have a family. Grace prepared her children by explaining Thomas's condition honestly but hopefully. "Thomas can't walk or talk like we can," Grace told them, "but he thinks and feels just like we do. He'll need extra help with everything, but he also has a lot of love to give." The logistics of caring for Thomas were enormous. Grace hired a team of specialists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and medical nurses. She converted a wing of the palace into a specialized care facility. But Grace's most revolutionary decision was to treat Thomas not as a medical patient but as a member of the royal family. Thomas was given his own beautiful bedroom overlooking the palace gardens. Grace commissioned custom furniture designed for his specific needs. She insisted that Thomas participate in family meals, even though he had to be fed through a tube. Most importantly, Grace talked to Thomas constantly, assuming he understood everything and was a full participant in family life. "Good morning, Thomas," Grace would say each day. "Today we're going to work on your therapy, then we'll sit in the garden and I'll read you a story." Grace's approach was considered radical by medical professionals. In 1968, children with severe disabilities were not expected to be part of normal family life. They were kept separate, hidden, treated as burdens rather than beloved family members. Grace ignored conventional wisdom and followed her instincts about what Thomas needed. The transformation began within weeks of Thomas's arrival at the palace. With constant love, attention, and stimulation, Thomas became more alert and responsive. His eyes showed increasing awareness and what appeared to be joy when his family interacted with him. Grace noticed that Thomas seemed to have favorite activities. He became calm and focused when she read to him. He showed excitement when taken into the garden. He appeared to recognize different family members and respond differently to each one. "He's in there," Grace told the therapists. "We just need to find a way to help him communicate." Grace researched cutting-edge treatments for cerebral palsy and brought specialists from around the world to work with Thomas. She was willing to try any therapy, any technique, any innovation that might help Thomas improve. The breakthrough came after 8 months of intensive work. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a speech therapist from Barcelona, suggested trying a primitive communication board with pictures and symbols. The idea was to see if Thomas could use eye movements to indicate choices or preferences. The first test was simple. Grace showed Thomas 2 pictures, one of food and one of music, and asked him to look at whichever one he wanted. Thomas immediately and consistently looked at the music picture. Grace put on a classical album, and Thomas's entire body relaxed with what could only be described as contentment. "He chose music," Grace said, tears in her eyes. "He made a choice." Over the following months, Thomas learned to communicate using eye movements and subtle head gestures. He could indicate yes or no, choose between options, and even express complex preferences. The medical team was amazed. Thomas's intelligence was not just present-ness, it was sophisticated. Dr. Vasquez developed increasingly complex communication systems for Thomas. Eventually, he was using a board with dozens of symbols to construct basic sentences and express detailed thoughts. The first complete sentence Thomas communicated was, "Thank you, Mama Grace, for bringing me home." Grace wept when she understood what Thomas was trying to say. For the first time in his life, Thomas had been able to express gratitude and love. Thomas's progress accelerated as he gained the ability to communicate. His physical condition improved with intensive therapy. While he would never walk independently, he gained some use of his hands and could control a specialized wheelchair. More importantly, Thomas revealed a remarkable intellect. Using his communication system, he demonstrated knowledge of literature, music, and art that he had somehow absorbed despite years of being treated as incapable of learning. Thomas had been listening and understanding all along. He had simply been trapped in a body that couldn't express what his mind was thinking. Grace arranged for Thomas to receive formal education through specially trained tutors who worked with his communication system. Thomas proved to be an exceptional student with a particular gift for languages and music. By 1974, 6 years after Grace had found him abandoned in a hospital room, Thomas was functionally literate in 3 languages and had composed several pieces of music using an adapted keyboard. The transformation was so dramatic that medical professionals from around the world came to Monaco to study Grace's approach to caring for disabled children. Grace used the attention to advocate for revolutionary changes in how society treats children with disabilities. Thomas isn't an exception, Grace said in a landmark speech to the International Association of Pediatric Medicine. Every child labeled as hopeless has the potential to surprise us. The problem isn't their disabilities, it's our lack of imagination and commitment. Grace established the Princess Grace Foundation for Special Needs Children in 1975, using Thomas's success story to raise awareness and funding for innovative treatments. The foundation pioneered new therapies, funded research into communication technologies, and trained medical professionals in Grace's philosophy of treating disabled children as whole people rather than collections of symptoms. Grace's work with Thomas influenced a generation of doctors, therapists, and parents. The idea that disabled children could be full members of their families and communities became increasingly accepted. Thomas himself became an advocate for disability rights. Using his communication system and, eventually, computer technology, he wrote articles and gave speeches about his experiences. In a 1978 essay titled, "My Life Before and After Love," Thomas wrote, "For 7 years I existed but did not live. I was cared for but not loved. Princess Grace didn't cure my cerebral palsy, but she cured my loneliness. She proved that love can reach into any prison, even the prison of a disabled body." Thomas lived with the Monaco royal family for the rest of Grace's life. He was treated as her 4th child and considered himself equally a member of the family as Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie. Grace's other children grew up with a profound understanding of compassion and inclusion because of their experience with Thomas. They learned that family isn't defined by biological relationships or physical abilities, but by love and commitment. Caroline later said, "Thomas taught us that being different doesn't mean being less. He was one of the smartest, funniest, most loving people I've ever known. Our family was better because he was part of it." When Grace Kelly died in 1982, Thomas was devastated. But Grace had prepared for this possibility by ensuring that Thomas would always be cared for and would never be abandoned again. Prince Rainier honored Grace's wishes by continuing to treat Thomas as a full member of the royal family. Thomas lived in the palace until his death in 2003 at age 42, far longer than doctors had ever predicted possible. Thomas's funeral was attended by disability rights advocates from around the world who credited him and Grace with changing how society views and treats people with severe disabilities. The Princess Grace Foundation continues to operate today, having helped thousands of children with special needs. The foundation's motto, chosen by Thomas himself, is "Every child deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they cannot do." Dr. Moreau, the physician who had declared Thomas hopeless, later became one of Grace's strongest advocates for disability rights. "Princess Grace taught me that medical training can make us experts on diseases, but not experts on human potential," Dr. Moreau said before his retirement. Thomas changed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone who knew him. He proved that love and determination can accomplish what medical knowledge alone cannot. The story of Grace Kelly and Thomas illustrates the transformative power of unconditional love and the danger of giving up on anyone regardless of their challenges. Grace Kelly saved Thomas from abandonment and neglect, but Thomas saved Grace from a superficial understanding of what it means to serve others. Through caring for him, Grace discovered her true calling as an advocate for the most vulnerable members of society. Their relationship proves that families are created not just by birth or law, but by choice and commitment. Grace chose to love Thomas when no one else would, and that choice changed both their lives immeasurably. The ripple effects of Grace's decision to adopt Thomas continue today. Thousands of children with disabilities have better lives because Grace Kelly refused to accept that any child was beyond help or unworthy of love. Thomas's story reminds us that intelligence, personality, and potential can exist in forms we don't immediately recognize. It challenges us to look beyond disabilities and see the complete human beings who deserve our respect, love, and commitment to helping them achieve their dreams. Grace Kelly is remembered as a movie star and princess, but her greatest role may have been as Thomas's mother, the woman who saw potential where others saw only problems and who proved that every child deserves the chance to surprise the world with their abilities. If this story inspired you, share it with others who believe in the power of love to transform lives. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments about times when someone saw potential in you that others missed. Don't miss our next video where we reveal other celebrities who changed lives through adoption and advocacy, stories that prove fame can be used to make the world a better place. Remember, the greatest victories aren't won on movie screens or in palaces, but in the quiet moments when we choose to love someone the world has forgotten. Grace Kelly and Thomas proved that love always finds a way to create miracles.